The bed had a plastic mattress cover that crinkled every time she moved, and the smell of the ward was the specific layered smell of a public hospital space that has been cleaned many times without ever quite being clean, antiseptic over something older and organic. The smell of too many people in too little space over too many years. The smell of a building that has absorbed every difficult thing that has happened inside it and retained a trace of all of them. This was the ward they had put her in, not the private wing, 3 floors up, where the rooms had windows that faced a courtyard garden, and the beds had actual mattresses, and the air was filtered, and the staff moved at a pace that suggested they had enough of them. Not the semi-private rooms on the 2nd floor that cost a reasonable amount and provided a reasonable environment for a person who was recovering from a fall and a minor concussion and needed quiet and rest. The ward, the general public ward of Mercer City Hospital, with 8 beds and a central nursing station and fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency specifically calibrated to prevent comfort, and a smell that announced, from the moment you entered, that this was a place where dignity was a resource allocated elsewhere. Sophia was lying in the 3rd bed from the door, in a hospital gown that was 2 sizes too large and had the specific, rough quality of fabric that has been industrially laundered several hundred times. And she was looking at the ceiling, and she was completely still, and she was thinking about what had just been said to her, which she was processing with the focused, unhurried attention she brought to things that mattered. What had been said was this: trash belongs with the trash. Adrian's and her and Adrian, who had told her on a rainy Tuesday in October 2 years ago, in a studio in Tribeca that smelled of oil paint and turpentine, and the coffee she had been making when he knocked on the wrong door, that she was the most interesting person he had met in years. Adrian had stood beside his mother and said nothing. He had looked at Sophia and said nothing. What would you do if this were you? If you had fallen from a scaffold in your studio while working on a canvas 6 feet off the ground, if you had been brought to a hospital with a minor concussion and a sprained wrist, if the man who had asked you to marry him 4 months ago had arrived with his family and had watched his mother tell the hospital administrator to put you in the public ward because you were not worth spending family money on, and had said nothing, what would you do if you heard the laughter that followed? The specific laughter of people who are confident that what they have done will have no consequences, that the person they have done it to has no recourse, that the distance between themselves and the person in the hospital bed is so fundamental and so permanent that cruelty in its direction is simply the accurate expression of a fact. Would you cry? Would you argue? Would you call for help, or make a scene, or demand to be heard? Sophia looked at the ceiling. She looked at the fluorescent light. She thought about what patience is, not the patience of someone who has no other option, but the patience of someone who has many options and has chosen, deliberately, the one that requires waiting. She raised her left hand. On her wrist, just below where the hospital ID bracelet had been placed, was a narrow band of woven material, dark blue, the kind of thing that looks, to anyone not looking for it, like a personal item a patient has been allowed to keep. She pressed the small metal element woven into its center once, with her thumb, one press, a signal that had been prepared and maintained and tested, and that had never, in the 3 years she had been living this particular version of her life, been used. She put her hand back on the bed. She looked at the ceiling. She gave herself 30 seconds of something that was not quite grief and not quite anger, and was instead the very specific feeling of a woman who has been patient for a very long time and has just reached the end of the patience, not with drama, but with the quiet, clean, complete quality of a door being closed. Then she breathed. And she waited, because she knew, with the certainty of someone who has made arrangements with extremely competent people, exactly what was coming, and exactly how long it was going to take. Constance Mercer had 14 minutes left of being right about anything. Her name, the name she had been born with, the name that appeared in the constitutional documents of a sovereign European nation, in the heraldic registries of 4 countries, and in the diplomatic credentials of every ambassador her nation had ever posted, was Princess Sophia Elena Marchetti of the House of Corveno, Crown Princess and sole heir to the Principality of Corveno, a sovereign Mediterranean nation of 1.8 million people with a history of continuous self-governance that preceded most of Europe's current borders, and a treasury that international financial analysis described, when it bothered to describe it at all, as structurally significant at the continental level, which was the language analysts used when they did not want to write out the number of zeros accurately. She had left when she was 24. She had been planning it since she was 22, which was consistent with how she planned things, carefully, from the inside out, with attention to every detail that could be anticipated, and a framework for managing the ones that could not. She had not run. Running was not her style, and would not have been possible, because the security apparatus around her actual life was comprehensive enough that running would have produced within hours a situation that was both embarrassing and futile. She had negotiated. The negotiation was with her father, Prince Etienne, who was 61 and had governed Corveno with the specific, patient authority of a man who understands that power maintained through trust is more durable than power maintained through force, and who had applied this understanding to his relationship with his daughter, since she was old enough to understand what a relationship with a parent was. He had listened to her case, which she had prepared with the precision of someone who had grown up watching diplomatic arguments being won and lost, and had developed an accurate sense of what made an argument persuasive. And he had asked 6 questions, all of them going to the exact center of what she was proposing. What she was proposing was this: she needed to know who she was without the principality. Not as a philosophical exercise. She had done the philosophy. She had read the theory. She had sat in the throne room at Corveno and looked at the portraits of her predecessors and understood with complete intellectual clarity the difference between an inherited position and an earned character. What she needed was not intellectual clarity. What she needed was the experience of being a person in the world without the architecture of her birth position surrounding her, protecting her, filtering every interaction through the knowledge of what she was and what she would one day be. She had said to her father, "I need to know if I am the person I think I am when I am nothing to anyone in the room." He had been quiet for a long time, and then he had said, "The emergency contact. You carry it always." "Yes," she said. "Quarterly confirmation of safety through Madame Renier." His chief of staff, a woman of 55 who had been with the family since before Sophia was born, and who found discretion not a professional skill, but a fundamental orientation. "Yes, and you come back," he said. The last condition, said in the voice of a man who is honoring something larger than his own preference. "I'll come back," she said. "I promise." She became Sophia Reyes. She had always painted. It was not a choice she had made as an adult, but something that had developed from childhood, from the specific combination of having access to extraordinary art from infancy and having a visual intelligence that found painting its most natural expression. She had studied, under a different name, at a small private art school in Florence during the 2 years of preparation, and the work she produced in those years was genuinely good in the specific way that work is good when the person doing it is not performing for anyone, not a teacher, not a family, not the expectation of an institution, but simply working because the work is what they have to say. She arrived in New York at 24 with a portfolio, a modest savings account structured through channels sophisticated enough that its actual origin was invisible, and a studio she had found through a sublet listing in Tribeca, a 4th-floor space with north-facing skylights and floors that had been painted over many times by many previous tenants, and which held, in the history of their layers, a kind of accumulated evidence of creative life that she found immediately and without. Analysis. Exactly right. She worked. She was good. She was not immediately famous. The New York art world does not receive new arrivals with uncritical welcome, and she had not expected it to. But she was, within the first year, receiving enough attention from the right galleries and the right collectors to sustain the studio and the life and the specific daily satisfaction of being evaluated on what she produced rather than on what she was born to. She met Adrian at the wrong door. This was entirely accurate. He had been visiting a friend who sublet the studio 2 floors below hers, had taken the stairs instead of the elevator and had miscounted, and had knocked on her door at 11 on a Tuesday morning while she was making the second coffee of the day and trying to decide whether the blue in the center section of her current canvas was the right blue or the almost right blue, which is the distinction that matters most in a painting and is often invisible until it is not. She opened the door. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has knocked on the wrong door and has found, in knocking on the wrong door, something more interesting than what he was looking for at the right one. He said, "I think I have the wrong floor," she said. "You do? What were you looking for?" He said. "David Chen's studio," she said. "Below you. 2 floors. Take the stairs." He said. "Is that a Reyes?" And he was looking past her, at the canvas in progress on the back wall of the studio, with the specific focused attention of someone who has recognized something and is trying to confirm the recognition. She turned and looked at the canvas. She looked back at him. "It's going to be a Reyes," she said. "It's not finished." He looked at her. "I didn't know Reyes was working in New York. Not many people do," she said. He said, "Can I?" And she said, "No." And he laughed. A real laugh, short and genuine. The laugh of someone who finds a refusal more interesting than an invitation, which told her something immediately. She gave him a coffee anyway. He was there for 2 hours, and he did not try again to look at the canvas. He talked about the work he knew. He had a collection, he said, that he had been building since his mid-20s, not inherited, assembled through the specific, selective process of someone who buys what he actually responds to, rather than what the market currently endorses. He talked about it with the specificity of someone who genuinely cares about the thing they are describing, and she listened with the attention she gave to things that interested her, and found that he interested her. His name was Adrian Mercer. He was 33, the son of Constance and William Mercer, the Mercer of Mercer Capital, the Mercer of the Mercer Hospital Cardiac Wing, the Mercer of an East Coast commercial real estate and private equity operation that had been built over 2 generations into something that financial journalism described as formidable. He worked in the family's private foundation, running the arts and culture portfolio, which was the role he had carved out for himself in the family structure, the role that allowed him to work adjacent to the money without being entirely inside it, which was the choice of a man who had enough self-awareness to understand that being entirely inside it would change something about him he wanted to preserve. He seemed, in other words, exactly what he appeared to be. She was not naive. She had been in enough rooms with enough people who appeared to be exactly what they appeared to be and were not, that she had developed a functional skepticism of appearance. But the skepticism required evidence in order to operate, and the evidence she gathered across the weeks and months of knowing Adrian was consistent. He was genuine. He was curious. He was capable of listening. He treated people in service roles with the specific, unremarkable decency of someone for whom decency is a baseline rather than a performance. She let herself be interested. She had decided when she left Corveno that part of the experiment, the thing she needed to know, was whether she could let herself be interested, whether she could be in a relationship without the specific, constant monitoring that the awareness of what she was and what she was carrying produced. She let herself be interested, and she found that being interested was not a threat to the moment. The monitoring was simply there, as it had always been, as background, while the interest was in the foreground, and the two coexisted without conflict. They were together for a year before she understood she was in love with him. She told herself this was the appropriate timeline for a decision of this kind. She had always been honest with herself about when she was making a decision, and when she was simply acknowledging that a decision had already been made. She did not tell him the truth. She intended. She told herself she would tell him before things became serious. And then Sirius arrived before she had managed the transition. And she told herself she would tell him before the year mark. And then the year mark passed. And she told herself before anything permanent. And then he proposed. And she said yes. And the truth was still in its pocket, larger and more complex than it had been at the beginning, and harder to deliver cleanly. The proposal was in her studio, which she had always loved as a detail, not in a restaurant or on a rooftop or at any of the locations where proposals are expected to happen, but in her studio at 7 in the evening, with the north light gone, and the lamps on, and the smell of paint and turpentine, and the specific warmth of a space that had been worked in all day. He said that he had been thinking about what he wanted for the next part of his life, and that the answer was her, and everything that was true about her. And he produced a ring, an oval yellow sapphire, warm and specific, clearly chosen for her rather than for the impression. And she said yes, and she meant it completely, and she still had not told him the truth. Constance Mercer had appeared in the relationship the way that certain, gradual, then comprehend with the quality of something has been building since before you. She was 64 years. She had the precise beauty as always in the physical expression of the position she ought, and she wore this beauty or the Chanel as a statement of category, not of self. She had graphed diamonds and the specific posture of someone who has never been in a room where she was not the most financially significant presence. and who has organized her entire self-concept around this fact. She received Sophia at their first meeting with the warmth of a woman conducting a comprehensive assessment. The assessment was continuous, and its conclusions were hardening. Sophia was a painter. Sophia's family was Spanish. Somewhere in Europe, Sophia said, with the vagueness of someone choosing their words carefully, which was accurate, and which Constance received as evasiveness, which it was, though not in the direction Constance imagined. Sophia's studio was in Tribeca, which was the right neighborhood but the wrong kind of residence. Sophia's work was selling, several significant sales, genuine critical attention, but it was selling in the way that art sells, which is irregularly and with the kind of income that does not provide the specific financial stability that Constance Mercer considered the baseline requirement for anything she endorsed. The comments began early. At the first family dinner, a Sunday lunch at the Mercer House in Greenwich, a house that had 12 bedrooms and a view of the Sound and the specific, expensively maintained quality of a property that has never been allowed to be anything less than perfect. Constance had looked at Sophia's hands, which had paint under the nails that she had not been able to fully remove, and said with the warmth of concerned observation, "Painter's hands. It's such physical work, isn't it? Very artisanal." She said artisanal with the specific tone of someone using a word they believe is a compliment, while using it as a designation of category. Sophia had said, "It is physical. Yes, that's one of the things I love about it." Constance had smiled. She had moved on. The engagement dinner was the first large-scale family event Sophia had attended. 40 people at the Mercer House. The dining room extended with a temporary wall removed to accommodate the table. White floral arrangements of the scale and variety that required a professional florist and a significant budget. Crystal and silver and the specific orchestrated quality of a gathering that has been organized to demonstrate the organizer's mastery of the form. Adrian sat at Sophia's right and his father at her left, and Constance sat at the far end of the table where she could see everything, which was where Constance always sat. The dinner had gone well for the first 90 minutes, which meant it had gone well for the period during which Constance had been managing it for presentation. Then the champagne toasts had begun, and Constance had stood and given the first toast, and the toast had been to Adrian, to his achievements, to his taste, to his judgment in all things professional and personal. The personal, a word that managed to acknowledge Sophia's existence, without including her in anything the toast was actually celebrating. Sophia had received this with the level attention she had been directing at Constance for 8 months, and had noted it with the precision she brought to all her noting. Then Constance's sister, a woman named Philippa, who had the elder sibling's version of Constance's particular skill, sharper, less managed, the same substance with more of the surface removed, had raised her glass and said, in a voice pitched for the table, "To Adrian finding someone who makes him happy, whatever form that eventually takes. Whatever form." The phrase was doing significant work. The phrase contained an entire assessment that the current form, Sophia, the painter, the woman with paint under her nails and a studio in Tribeca and a family somewhere vaguely in Europe, was provisional, that a more appropriate form would eventually assert itself, that the table was united in this understanding, and the toast was acknowledging it while appearing to celebrate something else. Sophia had looked at Adrian. Adrian had looked at his champagne glass. He had not said anything. This was the moment. She would think about it later, sitting in the hospital bed, looking at the ceiling. This was the moment she should have understood fully what she was dealing with. Not Constance's cruelty, which she had understood for months. Not Philippa's dismissal, which was consistent with everything she had observed of the family's manner, but Adrian's silence. Adrian looking at his champagne glass while his aunt implied that his fiancée was a temporary arrangement. She had filed it. She had not acted on it. She admitted to herself now, wanted more time. She had wanted the time to not be wasted. She had wanted, in the very human way of people who have chosen something, and need it to be right, for it to be right. The accident happened 3 weeks later. She had been working on a large canvas, 6 feet by 8, suspended on a wall scaffold in the studio, and she had leaned too far to reach the upper right corner, and the scaffold had shifted and she had fallen. Not far, about 4 feet. She had landed on her left side on the studio floor, which was wood over concrete, and the landing had produced a sprained wrist, a bruised hip, and the specific disorienting sensation of having hit her head hard enough to need assessment. She had called Adrian. He had come immediately. He had also called his mother, which was the detail she had not anticipated, and which she would think about carefully later. At the hospital, Mercer City Hospital, the facility that bore the family name, whose cardiac wing had been endowed by Constance and whose administrator therefore received calls from Constance with the immediate, deferential attention of someone whose institutional survival is partially dependent on the goodwill of the caller. Constance had arrived before the admissions process was complete. She had taken control of the admissions process in the specific, smooth way that Constance took control of things, not by demanding, but by simply proceeding as though control was already hers, and that the people in the room were simply slower to understand this than she was. She had spoken to the administrator. She had spoken with the calm, quiet authority of a woman who has endowed a wing and intends to have this understood. And then she had turned to Adrian and she had said, in a voice that was not quite low enough to be private, but was clearly designed to function as private, the voice of a woman who wants her statement to be on the record with her son and does not particularly care if it is also on the record with anyone else. She's not worth Mercer money. The public ward is where she belongs. It's where this has always been heading. Adrian had said, "Mother." Constance had said, "No. I have been patient long enough. This episode is the universe being clear about something we should have been clear about months ago. She is not for you. She has never been for you. And I am not spending this family's resources on someone who is going to be gone within the year." Adrian had said, "Sophia." Sophia had looked at him. She had looked at him with the full, complete, unhurried attention she had been giving him for 2 years. And she had looked for the things she needed to see, the intervention, the defense, the choice in her direction over his mother's direction. The thing that a man who loves you does when someone calls you not worth their money. And she had not found it. He had looked away. The administrator had processed her to the public ward. Now she lay in the bed with the plastic mattress cover and the fluorescent buzz and the smell of too many people in too little space. And she had pressed the signal on the band around her wrist, and she was waiting. She was not anxious. She was not afraid. She was in the specific, complete stillness of a woman who has made a decision and is now on the other side of it, waiting for the world to catch up. She counted, not because she needed to, but because counting was a form of attention, and attention was what she did when things required her best. At 12 minutes and 40 seconds, she heard them, not with her ears first, with her body. A vibration in the bed's metal frame, a frequency that moved through the hospital's infrastructure in the specific way of coordinated movement, many people moving together, with the synchronized precision of training applied to the point where it has become automatic, their footfalls on the corridor floor producing a rhythm that was not noise, but signal. Then the double doors at the end of the ward opened. They came through in 2 columns of 5, then a second set, then a third, 40 men in total, in black suits of a quality that was immediately visible even at distance, cut with the precise formality of people whose clothing is a uniform in every sense except technical one. White shirts, black ties, dark earpieces with coiled cables disappearing into collar, and on the lapel of each jacket, small but entirely legible to anyone who knew to look for, the Corveno seal, the crowned olive branch above the blue field of the Mediterranean, silver on black. They moved into the ward in complete silence. Not the silence of stealth. They were not attempting to be unheard. The footfalls were deliberate, and their rhythm was a statement, but the silence of people who have nothing to say because everything is being communicated through their presence and their positioning. They took positions along the ward's perimeter, at every exit, at every window, at intervals along the walls between the beds. The other patients in the ward, 6 of them in various states of illness and recovery, became very still. The nursing staff at the central station became very still. The orderly, who had been in the process of changing an IV bag at the bed nearest the door, became very still with the bag in his hands. In 30 seconds, the public ward of Mercer City Hospital had become a secured space. This had occurred without a raised voice, without an aggressive gesture, without anything that could be classified as threatening in the conventional sense. 40 men in black suits had walked into a room and positioned themselves, and the room had understood, at a level below language, that its status had changed. Constance Mercer was standing in the corridor outside the ward. She had come to check on the progress of what she had arranged, to confirm that the arrangement had held, that the administrator had maintained his position, that the woman in the public ward was where Constance had decided she belonged. She had come with Philippa and a woman named Barbara Strand, who was the wife of one of William Mercer's business partner and who shared Constance's assessment of Sophia with the reliable enthusiasm of someone for whom other people's humiliations are a form of entertainment. She had come, in other words, to see. She saw the guards come through the hospital's main entrance instead, because the guards had not come through the ward doors first. They had entered the building at every available entrance simultaneously, a coordinated entry that had been briefed to the building's security in the 90 seconds before it began. The briefing delivered by a man in a dark suit who had produced credentials that the security staff found. Looking at them, looking at the seal, looking at the specific, serious quality of the documentation, sufficient to produce full cooperation. Constance saw the men in the lobby. She saw the seal on their lapels. She did not yet know what the seal meant, but she recognized the category of thing she was seeing. She had been in enough rooms where serious security was present to know that what was in the lobby of Mercer City Hospital was not private, not corporate, not the kind of protection that money buys. It was the kind that sovereignty confers. She said to Philippa, "What is this?" Philippa said, "I don't know." The elevator opened. A man stepped out who was not a guard, a man of about 50 in a suit that was a different category of quality from everything else in the lobby. The suit of someone for whom clothing is not a statement, but a function. The function of representing something that requires the quality of the representation to be beyond question. He carried a leather document case with a seal embossed in its surface. He walked through the lobby with the specific, unhurried confidence of someone who knows exactly where he is going and knows that the space will arrange itself around his path. He was Ambassador Thierry Delacroix of the Principality of Corveno, accredited to the United States, the United Kingdom, and 5 other sovereign nations, and he had been in his car when the signal was received, because he had been advised 3 years ago that the signal might come and had maintained his readiness in the specific professional way of someone who takes an instruction from a sovereign family seriously. He walked into the public ward of Mercer City Hospital. He walked to the 3rd bed from the door, and he stood beside the bed and he inclined his head, not a bow precisely, not the formal court bow of a state occasion, but the specific, deliberate inclination of a man showing respect to someone who commands respect. And he said in a voice that was low but entirely clear in the stillness of the secured ward, "Your Highness, the Principality extends its deepest concern for your well-being and its profound apologies for the circumstances in which you find yourself." The ward was so quiet that the fluorescent lights could be heard buzzing. "Thank you, Ambassador," Sophia said. Her voice was the same voice she had been using in this ward for the past 13 minutes. Level, clear, entirely itself. He placed the document case on the bed beside her and opened. He removed a single document on heavy cream paper with the Corveno seal at its head, and he held it so that it could be seen rather than read, so that the seal and the format and the category of thing it was could be registered by anyone in the room who was looking. "At 7:42 this morning," he said, "the Crown of Corveno, through its designated holding instrument, completed the acquisition of Mercer City Hospital and its associated medical campus, including all properties, equipment, staff contracts, and operational licenses from the current ownership group." He paused. One pause, specific and measured. "The acquisition is complete and registered. The facility is now a sovereign medical institution operating under Corveno administrative law with immediate effect." The administrator of Mercer City Hospital, who had entered the ward 2 minutes ago when he saw the guards taking positions and had been standing near the nursing station trying to understand what was happening, made a sound that was not a word. "The former ownership group," Ambassador Delacroix continued, and there was something in the way he said former, not emphasis, not drama, simply accuracy, "has no further administrative standing in this building. Their access authorizations have been revoked as of the completion of the acquisition." He looked up from the document. He looked at the ward doors. Constance Mercer was in the doorway. She had come when she saw the ambassador enter the ward, had followed with Philippa and Barbara Strand, because she was a woman who moved toward things that required her management rather than away from them, which was a quality that had served her extremely well her entire life and was serving her very poorly right now. She was looking at the seal on the ambassador's document case. She was looking at the guards in their positions. She was looking at the woman in the bed, the woman with the hospital gown and the bruised wrist and the painted fingers, with the expression of someone whose model of reality has just been handed information it was not built to receive. "This is a private facility," Constance said. Her voice was steady. She was a woman who had maintained her composure in difficult situations for 40 years, and she was maintaining it now, though the composure was doing more work than it usually. "The Mercer family has—" "The Mercer family," said Ambassador Delacroix, turning to face her with the specific, courteous precision of a diplomat who has been doing this for 25 years and has encountered every variety of person who requires the same essential information delivered in different registers, has no standing in this facility as of 7:42 this morning. "I will ask you to please respect the sovereign space of this institution and exit the building." "I beg your pardon, Mrs. Mercer." Two of the guards had moved to the doorway, positioning themselves with the same unhurried precision with which they had taken their initial positions. They did not touch her. They did not raise their voices. They simply existed in the space between her and the interior of the ward with the specific, total quality of a boundary. "You are being asked to leave the building. This request is being made as a courtesy. It will not be repeated." Constance looked at the guards. She looked at the ambassador. She looked finally at the woman in the bed. The woman in the bed was looking back at her. Sophia looked at Constance Mercer with the level, complete, unhurried attention she had been directing at her for 8 months. The attention that had documented every comment and every dismissal and every artisanal and every not worth Mercer money. And the look contained all of it. And the look was entirely still. And the look held no anger and no triumph and no satisfaction, because none of those things were necessary. The situation was what it was. The situation was accurate. It did not require her emotional participation to be real. "Mrs. Mercer," Sophia said. Her voice was the same voice. "Thank you for your honesty this morning. It was the most useful thing you have done for me in 8 months." Constance's mouth opened. She closed it. Adrian was in the corridor behind his mother. He had arrived 2 minutes after the ambassador, having been on the hospital's 2nd floor when the guards entered the building, and he had followed the sound of something unusual, the way you follow something unusual when you do not yet know what it is. He was standing behind Constance in the doorway with the expression of a man who has understood several things in rapid succession and is still in the process of integrating them. And the integration was visible on his face in the specific, progressive quality of someone moving through shock toward comprehension. He looked at the ambassador. He looked at the guards. He looked at the seal on the document case. He looked at Sophia. "Sophia," he said, her real name, the version with the accent. He did not know that was her real name. She had been Sophia, without the accent, for the 3 years of this life. But the natural Spanish inflection of it came from him without deliberation, which told her something she filed and did not pursue. "Hello, Adrian," she said. "What?" He stopped, started again. "Who are you?" She considered the question. It was the right question. It was the question she had been waiting for someone to ask her who knew her, which was different from the question being answered by the ambassador's statement in the ward, which was a different kind of knowing. "I am Sophia Reyes," she said. "I am a painter. I live in Tribeca. I am the woman you asked to marry you 4 months ago, and I said yes. And I have been honest with you about everything that mattered, about who I am, and how I live, and what I value. And I have been dishonest about one specific thing, which is the name I was born with and the position it comes with." She paused. "My name is Princess Sofia Elena Marchetti, of the House of Corveno, the Principality of Corveno, in the Mediterranean. I am the crown princess and sole heir, and this," she indicated the room, the guards, the ambassador, the document on the heavy cream paper, "is what that means when it is required." Adrian looked at her. He was a man who was capable of listening and capable of revision and capable of genuine interest in things that were not about him. And these were the qualities she had loved it, and these were real. They had always been real. They were real right now in the way he was looking at her. Not with calculation, not with the immediate reach for a strategic position, but with the honest, open quality of someone absorbing something large. And then he said, "I didn't know." "No," she said, "you didn't. And my mother, your mother said what she said," Sophia said, "this morning and at the engagement dinner and on many occasions between those two. and you were present for most of it, and you said nothing." She looked at him steadily. "Not because you were unkind. I don't think you are unkind, but because choosing me, specifically, over the comfort of your family's position, you were not able to do that consistently, and I needed someone who could." He absorbed this. "Sophia, I'm ending the engagement," she said. Not loudly, not with any performance of emotion, with the simple, precise quality of a decision that has been made and is being stated accurately. "I'm sorry. I mean that. You are genuinely a good person in most of the ways that matter, but not all of them. And the ones you are missing are the ones that matter most to me." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the ring on her left hand, the oval yellow sapphire, warm and specific, that he had chosen with the genuine of choosing something to keep it, he said. Not strategic, not because he was calculating an outcome, because he meant it, and he knew she knew he meant it. And it was the last thing he had to give her that was entirely his own. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. "Thank you," she said. She meant it. The ambassador had stepped to the side, creating space, performing the specific function of his position. Present, available, neither intervening nor withdrawing, simply there in the way that representation is there when it is needed. Adrian left. He took his mother and his aunt and Barbara Strand out of the hospital with the specific, quiet authority of a man who has understood several things and has decided that the most useful thing he can do right now is leave, which was, she thought, the most choosing her thing he had done in the entire relationship. Ambassador Delacroix waited until the ward was clear of the Mercer family. Then he turned back to the bed. "Your Highness," he said, "the prince sends his love. He asks if you are well." "Tell him I'm well," she said. "I have a sprained wrist and a minor concussion. The medical team can assess from here." "Of course." He reached into the document case and removed a second document. "With respect to the acquisition, the hospital has been purchased through the Crown Foundation's medical infrastructure arm. It will be renamed and operated as a public access facility with upgraded standards across all wards, effective within the quarter. The administrator has been briefed on the transition term." He paused. "The Mercer family's endowment of the cardiac wing has been returned to them, as the principality will be funding the wing directly going forward." Sophia looked at this for a moment, at the institutional logic of it, the clean, specific, total quality of a response that addressed not just the immediate incident, but its structural cause. The hospital that bore the Mercer name, that Constance Mercer had wielded as an instrument of social positioning, was no longer a Mercer hospital. The wing named for the family would be renamed. The endowment, the thing that had given Constance the administrator's compliance this morning, had been returned, which meant it was gone, which meant the relationship that had made this morning possible was dissolved. "Good," Sophia said. She looked at the ward, at the 8 beds and the fluorescent lights and the smell that was still the smell of too many people in too little space. But that was going to, within the quarter, become a different smell. The smell of a ward that has been properly funded and properly staffed, and that has stopped asking its patients to absorb the cost of institutional underinvestment with their bodies and their dignity. She thought about what she had learned. Not in the ward. She had known what she was learning in the ward while she was learning it before it. She thought about the studio in Tribeca and the north light and the canvas that was still on the wall with the upper right corner unfinished because she had fallen from the scaffold trying to reach it. She thought about what had been real in the 3 years of the ordinary life she had built in New York, and she found that almost all of it had been real. The work most of all. The specific daily satisfaction of being evaluated on what she produced rather than what she was, of walking into a gallery and having the conversation be about the painting and not about the painter's position. That had been real. She was going to take that with her. She was also going to finish the canvas. But first, she was going to go home to Coveno, to her father, to the conversations that had been deferred for 3 years and were ready to be had. She was going to go home with the knowledge she had left to find, the knowledge that she was a person who could walk into a room and be found interesting on her own term, that she could love someone and be loved for the specific, unrepeatable person she was rather than for what she represented, that the woman inside the position was real and sufficient and capable of being known. She had found it. It had cost her things she had not anticipated. The specific grief of a relationship that contained genuine good things and was not enough. But it had produced what she had needed, and the needing had always been real, and the finding of the answer was permanent in the way that lived experience is permanent. She pressed the signal band one more time. Not because she needed to. The room was already secured. The ambassador was already present. The acquisition was already complete. But because she wanted to feel, one last time, the specific quality of that motion, the calm, deliberate press of a woman who has made an arrangement with competent people and trusts the arrangement, which is the most practical and most complete form of power she knows. True power, she would tell the foundation meeting she would chair in Corvano 6 months later, a meeting about the governance of the newly renamed public hospital in New York, now operating under the Corvano Medical Foundation with full public access and significantly upgraded standards across every ward, including, with specific, the ward on the ground floor. True power does not need to shout. It does not need to stand in a hospital corridor and announce that trash belongs with the trash. It does not need to endow a wing to have a building's administrator in its pocket. It does not need to perform its superiority because its superiority is not a performance. It simply is what it is in every room, including the rooms with plastic mattress covers and fluorescent lights and the smell of too many people in too little space. And it waits, and the waiting is itself the statement. And when it speaks, when it presses one small signal once with a steady thumb, the statement arrives in the form of 40 men in black suits and an ambassador with a document on heavy cream paper and a sovereign acquisition completed at 7:42 in the morning. And it is absolute, and it was always the truth. Did Constance Mercer and every person in that corridor who laughed when she said trash belongs with the trash earn everything that came for them that morning? The revoked access authorizations, the returned endowment, the renamed wing, the hospital that bore their name for 30 years and does not bear it anymore. If you felt the specific cold satisfaction of watching people who used a building's name as a weapon discover that the weapon had changed hands before they woke up, then smash that like button right now, share this story with someone who needs it today, and subscribe to this channel, because the stories of quiet power and absolute karma never end, and every single one of them is worth exactly this.